Hello, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of Royal Black and Elite. I'm Lady Trinette Wilson, and if you're new here, hello, welcome, everyone. Hi, members, and hello, Royalers. You all listen. Today's lecture is very interesting. If you've ever heard of the play A Raisin in the Sun, I never knew Lorraine Hansberry, who was the author of that play, passed away so early in life. And it was the first play that I ever acted out in school. So I thought this would be a wonderful lecture. She has a rich life and history. Whoever knew the author of The Raisin of the Sun passed in her 30s. So, welcome everybody. Let's get right into our lecture. She was born Lorraine Vivian Hansberry on May the 19th, 1930 in Chicago, Illinois, and she was the youngest of four. Now, her parents, Carl and Nanny Hansberry, they were very prominent African American people, and they were intellectuals and activists. Her father was actually successful at being a real estate broker, and he fought against housing segregation, and her mother was a dedicated school teacher and community leader. So from a young age, she really was active in politics and at least seeing it and fighting against racial injustices. So we understand now where her writing came from. Now, it was a lot of deep division and racial division in Chicago. And look at some of my stories. Even though people moved north from the south to the north, they still faced racial division. In fact, the Hansberries made history when they challenged Chicago's restrictive housing covenants, fighting to live in a white neighborhood. So they want to live wherever they wanted to live. Their battle went all the way you all to the U.S. Supreme Court. It was a landmark case, and it was called Hansberry versus Lee in 1940. So it really shaped her life for equality and justice. And can you imagine going all the way to the Supreme Court behind where you want to live? Uh, so, growing up surrounded by activism, literature, and political discussion, Lorraine really developed a powerful sense of her purpose. And so she attended the Inglewood High School and later enrolled at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where she studied painting and writing. And it must be wonderful to be able to major in painting and writing and make a living at it, right? But that's what she did. But soon her creative spirit, it really changed her and pushed her to something even bigger in the world of writing. And that's when she became a playwright and moved to New York. She actually began working for Paul Robeson's newspaper Freedom. And there's where she wrote, championing civil rights, women's rights, and global liberation movement. So this is basically what she wrote. But in 1957, she wrote what became a masterpiece, A Raisin in the Sun. Now, she said that it was inspired from a line in Langston Hughes' a poem, Harlem. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? And the Bible even refers to what happens when a dream is not realized. So when you have to wait and wait, it does something to a person. And so the play told the story of a black family in Chicago struggling with poverty, discrimination, and the pursuit of the American dream. I think P. Diddy played one of the roles in this show a time ago, so that was something. But anyway, when A Raisin Sun premiered on Broadway in 1959, it actually made history. She was the first black woman to have a play performed on Broadway. And can you believe it, you all? She was just 29 years old. Now, I'm sure because of her connections already within the industry, like I said, her family was well placed within the civil rights movement. She was able to move her career along a little faster and get her play in front of someone who could count. And so the play starred a young Sidney Poitier and Ruby Dee. Beautiful, look at them. And the success, it was truly groundbreaking. The critics hailed it as the most honest portrayal of black life ever seen on the stage. The play didn't just entertain, it really brought real life for what they were facing back in that time. You know, the 1950s was tough for black people. And then even going into the 1960s when we saw the civil rights movement. So this play was timeless. So beyond the theater, Lorraine was deeply involved in the civil rights movement. She worked alongside some of the era's most powerful voices, people like James Baldwin, Paul Robeson, I mentioned before, and Nina Simone. And Nina Simone said she titled her song to be young, gifted, and black after Lorraine's honor. Now, Lorraine used her art and her voice to speak truth, and she attended meetings with student nonviolent coordinating committee leaders. She joined protests and spoke out for women's equality long before feminism even became mainstream. So she was out there in the movement, putting her life on the line. Lorraine was really, truly an activist, truly writing, and she truly grew up in it. And she was really writing, really fighting a real fight. If you can't live somewhere, that's a fight. You know, if you can't do what you want to and make the kind of money you want to or work where you want to because you're being discriminated against, that's a fight. So she was really going into some really deep things. Now, there are rumors that also said that she was a lesbian. So we don't know if that's true, but because she never said anything about it. So we don't know. But she did write under pseudonyms for lesbian publications, sharing her thoughts about love, freedom, and self acceptance. So even though she never told anybody really how she lived her life, just by her actions writing for these publications, perhaps she really was. We don't know. We do know she never was married and she never had children. And really it's because she passed away when she was so young. She was going about doing her work, doing her writing, her activism, and then all of a sudden her health began to fail. Now, this is only 4 years after The Raisin in the Sun premiered on Broadway. She was only 33 years old. She found out, you all, she had pancreatic cancer. And this was in 1963. Now, we know pancreatic cancer, or if you don't know, it is one of the most aggressive forms of cancer. Back in those days, they didn't have access to good medical care. So even nowadays, if you get sick with pancreatic cancer, your chances of living is very, very small. So this was a very aggressive cancer. She was young, she was strong, but she really was she couldn't fight this. She really couldn't fight it. She did continue to work as long as she could, writing essays, plays, and speeches. She wanted to use every moment she could to make a difference. But you all, on January the 12th, 1965, Lorraine Hansberry died in New York City at just 34 years old. Rest in peace. The world was shocked. Her friends, like James Baldwin, they mourned her deeply, calling her a writer who was never afraid to look at things as they were. So even in her short life, she truly changed American culture. Her play, A Raisin in the Sun, continues to be performed worldwide and studied in schools and adapted into films, including the famous 1961 movie starring, of course, Sidney Poitier, and later versions with Danny Glover and I mentioned earlier, Sean P. Diddy. So her essays, journals, and speeches, they really inspired everybody. So her words, y'all, still resonate. Had you ever heard of Lorraine Hansberry? Again, she was the first play that I ever was in, and I discovered my talent for speaking and things in. So she was truly inspirational. From August Wilson to Suzanne Laurie Parks, and even Issa Rae, her influence does live on. So I hope that you enjoyed today's lesson and learned a lot. If you didn't know who she was, that you did learn about a civil rights leader, a playwright. She was truly a gifted woman, and perhaps maybe she received all that success and did all of that work early in her life because God knew that she would pass early. So you all study up on pancreatic cancer. Make sure you're taking care of yourself, and I want to thank you for joining me for another great episode episode of Royal Black and Elite. As you know, my lessons are always for education and entertainment purposes only, and the Fair Act use is in effect. Now, y'all continue to learn. Click down below. Y'all know I have a lot of videos down there for you. Y'all, we have reached almost 49,000 subscribers. I just give God all the glory. And I thank you all for tuning in to learn about these elite black people in history. Have y'all ever heard of Lorraine? Did you see the play? Y'all talk to me down below. As you know, when you like, share, and subscribe, it really pushes it through the algorithm so that other people can learn about these great black elite people from a real person and not just AI. So I appreciate you guys for liking, sharing, and subscribing. Definitely comment. And also, y'all hit y'all notification bell. People say they don't get notices sometime when I'm putting out my video. So when you hit that notification bell, you're sure to get it. Lastly, you all tune in this Friday for Hunter's Point. We're on episode 6. It is heating up, and I really thank you for supporting the show. When you support shows like this, it shows others that you're interested in our royal black and elite history. So, guys, have a great day. Thanks y'all for tuning in, and keep on learning.